So this was a topic that came up in the Patreon Slack. Again, that's where all of the action is happening. Great questions asked all the time. This one drew particular attention, and so we figured it was worth getting out to the general population to see what you guys think about this. And the general question is around set lists, so that's kind of why we were alluding to that
Right.
from that review reference. And the idea is, we talk a lot about energy and flow and that kind of thing, but we don't always talk about
this one's
the
not about
logistics.
content. This one's not about content. It's about timing, which is a really interesting aspect of what's important in building a set list.
So depending on the way that you structure your show, there are folks out there that are doing single 4-hour sets, and that's what they're doing.
Yep.
Most of us are breaking them up into smaller bits. Our normal go-to is 275s.
Mm-hmm.
That's our normal, if we're doing 2 sets, we'll be playing about 2.5 hours worth of whatever. But what does that look like? Well, first off, what does 2 hours and 30 minutes of music look like? But what does that look like as far as breaking it up into 2 sets?
Yeah.
And how do you account for things and all of the other kind of
and how detailed is your planning around those sets? That was really a question. And some Patreon members showed their spreadsheet where they have rigorously recorded the amount of time each track takes, and usually there are bands that are working with tracks, so it's finite. It's not variable based on how much adrenaline the band is having that night.
Right.
Which for those of us who don't work on tracks really means that songs can vary a lot, but if you have it locked in, you can really dial in exactly this duration for a set. And so the question is, do you do that, or do you wing it, or do you build out a set list that's close, or what's your play?
And it's interesting because there was no singular answer. There was no monolith to this whole situation, because there were people that were very regimented, and the songs are precise. The breaks are precise. The content that is covered during those breaks is all laid out ahead of time. It is very regimented. It is very specific. And it's one of those operations where everything's accounted for. And you start and it just goes from one thing to the next, and it's very precise and quick.
Yep.
That is not what I do. Is that what you do?
No. What do you do?
So our general idea is to kind of come within 5 minutes of the target as just kind of a general thing. So much like Dan alluded to, my band plays to tracks. And so we know pretty much what every song is. And if you use a service like Band Helper, you can put the duration in, even if it's just a guesstimate. And for what it's worth, Band Helper also can do that. You can say, hey, just on average, every song is 3 minutes and 30 seconds.
We'll get into that when we talk about my process.
So typically the way that I look at something is we will do set 1, and again, within 5 minutes, set 2, probably, it might be a little bit shorter. And the only reason why it's shorter is because we'll also have like a stack of back pocket songs. So we'll have 5 tunes that aren't technically in the set list, but are there to drop at a moment's notice.
Yep.
And typically, if any set is going to get cut down or run short, it's going to be the second set because of all the other stuff that's going on at whatever your event you're doing. So within 5 or 10 minutes is the target, with 5 or so alternate audible songs to kind of pull out just in case. That's our move.
Yep.
And there'll be marks for breaks. Typically, we've got our show broken up into chunks, like where one song goes into the next and that kind of thing. And, there might be a tuning break, or might be put a guitar down, pick a guitar up. So that's typically, we'll probably account for 3 to 4 stops in a single set. And those might be mapped, or they may just kind of be out in the breeze.
Yeah.
All right. How about you?
So my current project does not use tracks, and how I manage time on them is, with some exceptions, I set a default duration in Band Helper of about 3 minutes, and just say the average song is 3 minutes. Now, there are some, I take our medleys and I put them all together in one quote unquote song in Band Helper. So it moves all in a piece. I can lay out how the transitions work, especially when it's come to broadcasting my screen to the other band helper screens in the room. That's really helpful because people can just walk right through it. They don't have to worry about changing songs in the middle of a medley. It's just all in one document. So those ones I go in and put in a specific duration to, or any others that I know are exceptionally long or exceptionally short. Song 2 is like 90 seconds long.
Yeah.
So I use the default except where I know that the default doesn't work. And then when I'm building a set list, for a 3-hour show, we'll typically do it in 2 sets. And I like the first set to be longer and the second to be shorter but higher energy. And in both cases, I will oversubscribe those sets. Like when you get going onto a plane and they're like, we've oversold this plane because we couldn't count how many seats there were and we screwed up and sold too many tickets. That's not what they're doing. They're hedging their bets that some people aren't going to show up. Right. And so that's not quite what I'm doing when I'm building a set list, but it's kind of like that. I know that I'm overbooking the set because there are songs that in the moment I'm not going to feel. The room's not right for them. I'm going to push them off for later, or maybe won't do them. I know there are going to be some that I will skip, and that's fine. We're going to call an audible, skip ahead. Especially, as you said, in the second set, we get a little compressed for time coming up on the end of the night and looking at what's left, and we're just not going to get it all in. So let's jump ahead to something, which means that I've got my typical closers. We close with a whole series of big bangers on purpose. And before that, I put in the songs that are a little more optional. They're still the right energy for a second set, but if we don't do them, it's not going to hurt my feelings.
Right.
And then I have a set that I call extras, and you can configure Band Helper to say that the songs in this one don't contribute to the total duration. They're not part of the time of the show. And I'll put callable audibles into that. And so the show will include those if it's right, if the room wants them. You got to stay. The problem with a really rigorous and locked in set list is that it limits your ability to dance with the room. And for me, that's really important. So I like that you've found a middle ground about that. My show's all middle ground. It's like the next song is open for debate. I mean, I set myself a plan, but no plan survives first contact with the enemy. It's fine. So that's my deal. I set up the set list to be deliberately with skippable things in them and things that might surprise me that I want to skip when I get there. That's also okay.
Yeah.
And then I set up a set that are extras that I can call to if they're the right song for the room.
Yeah. There were some really interesting resources that, people contributed in the conversation. Got to shout out Adam Moskowitz. He's one of those people that like everything is very, very precise.
Yes.
So he's got a formula for the number of songs that they choose for the period of time that they're playing.
Yeah.
And it's everything from 15 minutes to 4 hours. And it's very precise. So in my case where I was talking about 275s, he's saying that's 35 songs just off the dome, which sounds about right. Cause it's like 17% is about what we would do. But it's just so interesting that like you can get really, really locked in, really granular.
Yes.
It's I think it's a testament to just whatever makes sense to your, whatever your neuroses may be.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I will say this, ours has definitely gotten a lot looser. There was not previously an extra list. There might be like one or two, but earlier this year, I kind of handed the reins over to Joey, who's been picking up a lot of the slack in that particular department. And between he and Amber, really, I have my opinions on stuff, but they really have figured out, like, they're really good about that whole energy kind of flow thing. Typically what happens is he'll put something out and then Amber will look through it and reorder it. And then I go in and like, okay, well, these two have to go together because of, reasons, guitar tuning or whatever. And so between the three of us, we can really dial these in. And the sets that we've been playing recently have been, one, varied. It's not the same thing every single time. And they seem to be really good with keeping the room on our side. So,
it's good.
It's working.
That's good. What do you, one of the objections to using tracks is that it does lock you into a show pattern and, impairs your flexibility. What's your tech setup to jump around a set list during a show? Walk us through that?
Yeah. So kind of the way that you were talking about, where everything's under the show is in Band Helper. Mm-hmm. And so you've got your set 1, you've got your set 2, you've got your extras. And so you basically have everything on a single page.
Yeah.
And, there have been times where we, like, maybe let's say set 1 goes long. And so we start kind of picking from set 2, but it doesn't require us to rejigger anything or load a different set or whatever. It's all there. And then as long as you got data, you can go in there and you can move stuff around during breaks and make sure that it's in the right order.
And is your playback coming out of Band Helper these days?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. We've done it both ways. Ableton's great, and it's probably where we will go back to at some point. But the gigs that we're doing right now and just the way that the setups are, a stereo playback is fine. The amount of time and effort it was taking to make sure that Ableton worked the way that it was supposed to was not worth the end result of all of that work.
Yeah, that's good. As somebody who's making my way toward tracks, it has felt like Ableton or whatever you're going to use, that's like a whole laptop-based approach, was going to take another staff member to operate. I mean, mm-hmm. it's essentially an instrument. And so I can tap the play button in Band Helper. In fact, I've learned how to build automation tracks in Band Helper that can also fire MIDI stuff. And so my, guitar rig is now ready to listen to changes as a song goes on. And I can talk to the Maestro DMX and change lighting cues as the song goes on from a prepared thing that I'm one tap away from in Band Helper on my iPad on my mic stand. So that's it makes me happy to hear that from you, that having been through very much more elaborate technical approaches, Band Helper is just kind of what you've fallen back to and it's working for you. So that's great.
Well, and to be fair though, you have made Band Helper your Ableton. Sure. So you've done the automation. It's really just it's a playback engine, and yeah. Some people use Pro Tools, some people use Logic, some people use Ableton, some people use Band Helper. There's no right answer. It's just in my situation, just the nervousness and the uncertainty of what the Ableton rig is or isn't going to do wasn't worth the time and effort it took to make the show in Ableton. Gotcha. Even though I spent a lot of time and resources making things work in Ableton. So like I said, maybe one day we'll get back to it. But everything else needs to get a hell of a lot easier if that's going to happen. Right. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, and it leaves you the ability to dance around the set list and make adjustments on the fly, which I think is really, I don't know, for the rooms I play, that seems to be important. I can't necessarily predict in advance when a bachelorette party is going to come through the door ready to throw down.
Yeah.
Right. And when I'm going to need to jump to somewhere on my set list that's about matching their energy.
There's ways of doing that in other programs, but for the time being, Band Helper is just the thing that's there. And that's not a dig on Band Helper. No. It's once you set it up, it is pretty much rock solid. Like I'll knock on my desk here, but it has not failed us, which is more there or less than I can say than Ableton.
Yeah. We really do get Arlo on for a conversation at some point.
Hey man, I'm down to talk. What we need to do is like collect a bunch of questions from our listeners.
Oh,
and then do.
That's a great idea.
Like if you could ask the guy who creates Band Helper anything, what would it be?
Yeah.
Coverbandconfidential@gmail.com. Let's get the ball rolling on that. We'll reach out to Arlo, see what he has to say about it.
Yeah, we are a very large audience of his users. It'd be a great way to have him connect with them.
Well, and for all of my gripes, I still recommend it all the time.
Totally.
It is the thing that I
absolutely.
tell people,
I run my karaoke out of it. I run all kinds of things out of it.
Shout out to Arlo.
100%.
So there doesn't seem to be any right or wrong way to do it. It's just the way that works or makes the most sense to you. And like I said, a lot of this is just going to be a product of whatever your neuroses may be.
That's right. How much control you're willing to cede to the flavor of the room at any given time.
But it is a really good idea to come up with some sort of system to allow you to be flexible. Because, I mean, we joke about it that, like, my band doesn't take requests. We're a lot less stringent about that. Yeah. If it makes sense and everybody's on it, the lineup is finally matured to a level where we can just pull something out of thin air and see what happens.
Yeah.
And once you get to that point, all bets are off. And that's the fun part, is that that's really where you get to like ride the room,
right?
Where you're literally just calling them out of thin air, or you find yourself in like a sweet spot and you know, okay, this one's going, this next one is going to murder.
Right.
That's always a good feeling.
Right. Yeah, for me, that's the joy of the whole thing is the give and take and the interplay with the energy of the room. And that's why I do the whole thing. That's, so anything that locked me into, oh, no, our next song is this, I wouldn't feel good about that. But that's my neurosis. So.
Yeah. I mean, there's comfort in structure.
Sure.
It's like we do this and we do this and we do, but it is nice to kind of throw caution to the wind.
Yeah.
But that is one of those things where you do have to be at a particular place with your lineup to do that. Because I feel like the way that this group's always been is that there's always going to be these kind of ramp up seasons, because when you've got the same thing going for as long as we have, people come and people go, and you just kind of have to work with what you've got.
That's true.
And, you may have a sub on a date or whatever, like all those things kind of factor into what may or may not make the final list.
Yeah.
But when A Squad's on, all bets are off.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a dance.
That's great.
It's a dance.
It's fun for sure.
Cool.
So guys, that's what we do. What do you guys do? Let us know about it. Coverbandconfidential@gmail.com. What is your foolproof set layout structure? How many songs is it? How many breaks do you take? And all of that stuff. We want to know about it, but we'll see what the if there is a consensus. There may not be.
How carefully timed is each of your songs?
Yes. I'm fully prepared to get hundreds of emails that all say the exact opposite of the one before them.
For sure.
And that's, I mean, we were talking about that last week. Do what we say or don't. Or don't not do them.
Yeah.
But primarily don't not do them.
Yeah, we're not your dad. Do what works.
Unless my son is listening to this and I am your dad, and
case,
go to bed.
Yeah, it's way too late
Brush
for
your
you.
teeth.
Yeah.